Primum.
Yeah. Well, look.
They tell me it's a discipline.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm proving wrong. The way you say Mass, now we're not talking about every little single rubric being a law of how you have to hold your hands, or where, at what point you put your hands on the altar like this, or like that, or you don't touch the altar at all. Those are little rubrics. But everything of it together, the way the church has to be built, the way the altar has to be built, the way the altar has to be decorated, the way the priest has to dress, the way the priest has to use the missal, the hour at which Mass has to be said, the time span that is allotted for Mass, which is not 2 hours like for some priests, and it's not 10 minutes like for other priests. 20 to 30 minutes, by the way, in the old Roman books on moral theology. The way the church is decorated, the way the altar is decorated, the way the priest looks towards God with his back to the people and not the other way around, which would denote, like this table, a meal or a desk, but not an altar. All of it together, and then the whole book, the Roman Missal, all of that together is what you call the lex orandi, the law of what has to be prayed. And that as such cannot be changed. For the simple reason that if you were to change this, you were to change the faith. If the law of what has to be prayed can be changed, then the law of what has to be believed can be changed. But if you change the law of what has to be believed, then you change the faith. And that's exactly what happened with the new Mass. The Novus Ordo Messe is the foundation of a new faith, of a new church, of a church that denies what the old church said, of a church that goes far beyond what the old church ever allowed. It's the foundation of a faith that makes all the truth of the old church relative. I'll explain that. But first, I want to answer your question on quo primum. The people say quo primum does not bind the successors of Pius V who wrote the document. If we dealt with a document that is merely disciplinary, that would be true. It has been pointed out to me, I didn't check it, but let's say it's true, just for the argument's sake. It has been pointed out to me that Pope Clement XIV, sometimes I say Benedict XIV, which is not true, it's Clement XIV. Pope Clement XIV abolished the Jesuit order using the same formula that Pius V was using. This document in itself is irreformable and irreversible, and whoever dares to do so, etc., etc. And then Pope Pius VII, I think it was, reinstituted the Jesuit order, and therefore he must be, obviously, if I was right talking about quo primum as binding, then Pope Pius VII committed a grave sin when he reinstituted the Jesuit order. What kind of argumentation is this? Abolishing a religious order and reinstituting a religious order is not a matter of faith. It's not a matter of sacraments. It's a matter of church government, period. And I just mentioned before, the Pope cannot bind his successor in church government. But to change the missal round is not just a question of church government.
But wasn't the missal an outcome of the Council of Trent?
No.
It was not?
No.
I thought the Council of Trent...
No, only the book as such, not the contents. Pope Pius V hardly changed anything in the book. The Missale Romanum of 1570 that was published with binding force forever by Pope Pius V is nothing else but the Missale that was used by the Roman Curia a century before, and the Missale of the Roman Curia that was used a century before is basically nothing else but the Missale that was used by Gregory the Great, the last one who dared to touch the Roman canon. When at the prayer, at the moment the priest holds his hands over the chalice like this and says, Hanc icitur oblationem. And Pope Gregory the Great, in 590 something, inserted the words diesque nostros in tua pace disponas into the Hanc icitur, so that you may dispose our days in your peace. your peace, mind you, not the way the world gives it, but your in pace tua disponas. When he did that, the population of Rome almost killed him. They said, how dare you touch the canon? That was in 590 something. Pope Gregory the Great was pope between 590 and 604. So in those days, the concept of tradition in prayer and the sacredness of the Holy Mass texts already was developed to a point that the population almost killed the Pope for touching it. But Gregory the Great did not scratch out anything, omit anything. He just added beautiful words, and yet he almost was not allowed to do that. This was the real sense of tradition that the Church once had, and that I hope we still have. Because the text of Mass is the foundation of your faith and my faith, which is the faith that Christ gave us, because of that, the text of Mass cannot be changed. And the rubrics cannot be changed in important matters. Look, the popes prove me right. For the simple reason that all the popes after Pius V until John the 23rd felt bound by Pius V. If you open up the Missale Romanum of St. Pius V, 1570, get an edition of something like 1950 or 1960, whatever, open up the book up front. You will find the Quo Primum document of St. Pius V. You turn the page, you will find the next document, I believe it's by Pope Urban VIII or something like that, I don't remember. You'll find a few documents by popes, successors to Pius V, and every single document explains very carefully why he dared to touch the book. So the few successors of Pius V who dared to change little rubrics or little prayers in the Missal explain so very carefully, saying that they did not change anything. When Pius X, Saint Pius X, in 1907 reformed the rubrics of Mass, and the breviary, by the way, but we're talking about Mass here, because the breviary is what the priest has to pray every day, and that's not the point here. The point is, we're talking about Mass. When he changed a few rubrics in the Missale of Pius V, what did he do? Well, for example, he promoted Sunday. In the old categories, before John the 23rd messed it all up with his first, second, third class, you had the category of a feast explained by how it was dealt with in choir, in chanting. So you had the duplex, that means you had to say all the antiphons fully. You had the semi-duplex when you said only half of it, and you had the simplex when you just pronounced the first word of the antiphon at the beginning of a psalm. And Pope Pius X promoted Sunday from a semi-duplex to a duplex prima classis, but only materially. I explain what that means. Before Pius X, most green Sundays, as we call them, the Sundays in the summer, the Sundays following Pentecost, Dominica post Pentecostum, was covered by a saint. You had Saint so-and-so and Saint here and Saint there, and the priest on Sundays would have to celebrate in red chasuble, white chasuble, whatever, but not a Sunday. So Pius X very rightly said, hey, wait a second. When in 1570, Pope Pius, St. Pius V, published his missal, there were very few saints in comparison to today, few saints in the calendar. And most Sundays were kept. So you had the liturgical times of the year. You had the season of Advent, violet, Christmas, white. After Epiphany, green. Lent, violet. Easter, white. Pentecost, red. And after Pentecost, green. And you would see this, the people would see it. But with all the saints coming in until St. Pius X, the calendar, the liturgical calendar, got so packed with feast days that sometimes during an entire summer, all of June, July, August, and September, you wouldn't see a single Mass in green. So Pius X said, I'm sorry, this is not what St. Pius V wanted. So he promoted Sunday from semi-duplex to a practical, mind you, to a practical duplex prima classis. So now only the highest feast days can make the Sunday secondary to be commemorated and not celebrated. But you know what? St. Pius X did not dare to change even the name of Sunday. Until John the 23rd, Sunday still said semi-duplex, even though it wasn't anymore. So Pius X was very, very, very careful in touching the missal and changing rubrics. And in his document that explains the changes, he explains exactly and almost apologizes why he dared to touch something as sacred as the Roman Missal. Now, isn't that exactly what I'm saying? Do you think that 5 or 6 popes after Pius V would have bothered with all these documents if they did not feel bound by the first one? Were all these popes idiots and now we've got the enlightened man on the throne of Peter? No. It's the other way around, believe me.
In reading Pope Primum, I don't see any out. I think